When we talk about regret, especially in the context of relationships, it's important to understand that regret doesn't appear out of nowhere. It emerges from a slow, almost invisible process where someone realizes the value of something only after it slips out of reach. And this is exactly what happens to many men when a woman finally decides to let go. While she was there, offering her presence, her softness, her emotional intelligence, he may have taken it as a given. He may have assumed her patience was endless, her love was unshakable, her availability guaranteed. But human nature has a strange tendency. We underestimate what we believe we'll never lose. It's only when a door closes, quietly, without drama, that we start to wonder why it ever felt safe to leave it open. A man rarely understands the emotional labor a woman carries until she stops carrying it. He becomes accustomed to her doing the emotional noticing, the checking in, the caring, the understanding, the remembering. And while he might appreciate it in small moments, he doesn't truly feel its weight. He doesn't grasp the depth of her presence because he hasn't had to imagine life without it. We don't measure the importance of oxygen while we're breathing. We feel its necessity the moment it's taken away. Her presence, her effort, her consistency, it was oxygen, and when she lets go, when she pulls back to reclaim her energy and dignity, that metaphorical air thins out. Suddenly, he's struggling to breathe in a space that once felt effortless. It's not that he never valued her, it's that he valued her in moments, not in the totality of what she brought. A man often thinks he has time to change, time to reassure her, time to step up, until he no longer does. Her letting go becomes the first time he feels urgency, not urgency to win, but urgency to reflect. Because when she leaves, he can no longer distract himself with the comfort of her being there tomorrow. Her absence breaks the illusion of permanence he quietly relied on. What makes this realization even more profound is that women rarely leave when things are bad. They leave when they've been strong for too long. They leave after countless internal conversations, after giving more chances than they should, after offering clarity, patience, and love in ways that went unnoticed. So when she finally lets go, it's not an impulsive move, it's an awakening. And that awakening becomes his wake-up call. He starts retracing his steps, analyzing the moments he dismissed, the conversations he ignored, the opportunities he wasted. Suddenly, the things she used to ask for sound reasonable. The emotions she expressed make sense. The boundaries she wanted become obvious. What once felt like pressure now looks like guidance. Her love, which he took as a certainty, transforms into something he now has to confront as a memory. This is why men often fall hardest when a woman walks away. Not because she's playing a game, but because her exit reveals everything he failed to see while she was still offering herself. And once a man realizes that her absence was created by his inattention, not her indifference, regret becomes unavoidable. The truth is simple. We only lose what we fail to appreciate, and we only appreciate what we learn we can lose. There's a moment that quietly shifts everything for a man, and it often happens after she's gone. It's the moment he realizes that her presence wasn't just comforting, it was anchoring him in ways he didn't fully understand. When she was in his life, he had a certain emotional stability that he didn't attribute to her. He assumed he was simply grounded, simply focused, simply balanced. But when she lets go, he starts to recognize that much of that balance came from her. her reassurance, her encouragement, her softness, her belief in him even when he doubted himself. And once that emotional safety net disappears, he begins to confront the emptiness that was always there, but was temporarily covered by her presence. A woman who cares deeply has a way of creating emotional warmth around a man. She notices things he overlooks, his fatigue, his frustration, his stress, and she adapts to it. She gives him space when he needs it, connection when he's craving it, and affirmation when he's quietly doubting himself. She fills emotional gaps without asking for credit, and because she does it so naturally, he doesn't recognize how much he leans on it. Her empathy becomes a cushion he unconsciously relies on. And the irony is, he often doesn't know he's leaning until there's nothing left to lean on. When she lets go, that warm emotional environment collapses. Suddenly, the comfort he took for granted vanishes. The simple messages she used to send, the thoughtful reminders, the steady presence, all of that disappears. He no longer has someone who intuitively understands his moods or easily forgives his rough moments. He no longer has someone to turn to when the world feels heavy. Her absence forces him into a raw emotional space, one where he has to sit with his own uncertainty, his own stress, his own fears, without the buffering effect she used to provide. And here's where regret begins. He realizes that her emotional support wasn't small. It wasn't something anyone could replace. It wasn't convenience. It was contribution. A contribution that held his life together in ways he never acknowledged. Men often underestimate the emotional labor women put into relationships because it's a labor that's invisible. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It simply appears. But when it disappears, its absence is deafening. He starts to feel the emotional cost of losing her. He notices the silence where her encouragement used to be. He feels the weight of decisions he once made lightly because she was there to help carry the emotional load. The world feels colder, not because anything external has changed, but because the person who brought warmth is no longer there. And in that coldness, he begins to understand the depth of what he lost. Psychologically, this is the point where the mind connects the dots. He realizes that she wasn't asking for much, she was giving much. And her absence becomes a mirror that reflects just how much of his stability came from her presence. It's not that she made him whole, it's that she amplified the best parts of him, and now he feels the contrast. In the end, the emotional safety he once dismissed becomes the very thing he longs for most. And that's the powerful truth. A man never forgets the woman who made his world feel safe, especially when he's the one who made her feel unsafe enough to walk away. There is something profoundly compelling about a woman who chooses herself. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way meant to punish or provoke, but in a quiet, grounded way that says, asterisk, I will not remain in spaces where my value is overlooked. Asterisk, when a woman lets go from that place of self-respect, it becomes a turning point, not only for her, but for the man who once assumed she would stay no matter how little effort he put in. And what makes this so powerful is that her detachment isn't fueled by anger, it's fueled by clarity. Men are often far more attracted to self-respect than they initially realize. They may be drawn to beauty, charisma, or warmth, but what keeps their attention, what earns their admiration, is a woman's capacity to stand by her worth even when it costs her something emotionally. When she lets go, she sends a message without saying a word. Asterisk, I am not afraid to lose you if keeping you means losing myself. Asterisk, that message hits him in a way her complaints never could. It reaches a deeper psychological layer because it reframes the entire dynamic. She's no longer the one seeking validation in the relationship. She becomes the one validating herself, and that is magnetic. Women often underestimate how powerful their boundaries are. Not the boundaries spoken in frustration, but the ones enacted with calm certainty. When she walks away from inconsistency, she shows she has standards. When she stops chasing reassurance, she reveals she already possesses inner security. When she stops fighting for someone who won't meet her halfway, she demonstrates emotional maturity. And a man, whether he acknowledges it or not, feels the shift immediately, because the absence of her effort exposes the absence of his. Her self-respect becomes the mirror that forces him to confront what he failed to give. He starts to see the contrast between how she treated him and how he showed up for her, and that contrast stirs something in him. It awakens admiration, it awakens desire, it awakens regret. But more than anything, it awakens recognition of her strength, her independence, and her refusal to settle. And here's the deeper psychological truth: people chase what they believe has value. When she remained despite being undervalued, he subconsciously concluded her presence could be taken for granted. But when she lets go, when she withdraws her emotional investment, her value skyrockets in his mind. Not because she became more valuable overnight, but because her actions finally matched the worth she always possessed. He sees her walking away not as a loss of love, but as an expression of dignity. And dignity is deeply attractive. This is why men often fall harder after a woman chooses herself. It's not the loss itself, it's what the loss reveals. It shows him the kind of woman she truly is. A woman who can love deeply without losing her identity. A woman who can give generously without sacrificing her boundaries. A woman who can walk away not because she stopped caring, but because she started caring about herself. And that realization changes everything. In the end, what a man regrets most is not losing a woman. It's losing the woman who finally remembered her worth. There's a moment in every relationship where words stop mattering, not because there's nothing left to say, but because everything that needed to be said has already been spoken. A woman who has tried, explained, clarified, repeated, and reasoned eventually reaches a point where saying more feels pointless. And instead of arguing, instead of pleading, instead of fighting for connection, she simply goes quiet. That silence is not emptiness, it's not indifference. It's the final stage of emotional exhaustion, and ironically, it's the moment a man finally begins to hear her. Silence is powerful because it removes the noise he used to hide behind. As long as she spoke, as long as she tried to repair things, he could tell himself that everything was fine, that she wasn't going anywhere, that he had more time, that the relationship could survive his complacency. Her words gave him a false sense of security. They were a sign she was still invested, still trying to make it work. But when she stops talking, the dynamic shifts entirely. That quiet becomes a kind of emotional spotlight, exposing everything he's been avoiding. Men often underestimate the meaning of silence. They think frustration is anger, that distance is moodiness, that withdrawal is temporary. What they don't realize is that silence is a decision. A woman doesn't go quiet because she has nothing left to say. She goes quiet because she no longer believes her voice will make a difference. And when a man finally realizes that, it hits him with a force he wasn't prepared for. Her silence becomes the moment he starts listening, not because she's speaking, but because he feels the void she used to fill. It's in that silence that he begins to confront his own feelings. Without her words guiding the emotional direction, he has to sit with the discomfort he once avoided. He starts noticing the absence of her energy, her laughter, her insight, her effort. The things she used to do effortlessly now stand in stark contrast to the emptiness left behind. And it's in that contrast that regret begins to grow. Because for the first time, he realizes she wasn't asking for too much. She was giving too much. Psychologically, silence disrupts emotional patterns. It interrupts the loop where she tries and he responds half-heartedly. It forces him to feel the weight of his own inaction. It makes him aware of the emotional distance he contributed to, and perhaps most importantly, it exposes the truth. She didn't stop loving him, she stopped fighting alone. This is the part that often haunts men the most. Not the arguments, not the tearful conversations, not the pleas for understanding. It's the quiet end, the moment she simply chose peace over persistence. Because silence has a clarity that words sometimes don't. It communicates that she's moved from trying to accepting, from hoping to releasing, from holding on to letting go. And a man, even if he doesn't admit it, feels the emotional consequences of that shift. He realizes that her silence wasn't punishment, it was protection, protection of her heart, her dignity, and her sanity. In the end, her silence becomes the moment he finally hears the truth he avoided all along. Nothing speaks louder than a woman who no longer needs to speak at all. One of the most profound moments of regret for a man happens when he realizes that her letting go wasn't an act of abandonment. It was a response to his own behavior. People like to believe that relationships end suddenly, but they rarely do. They end gradually, quietly, through small choices, missed moments, and emotional neglect that builds over time. And when she finally walks away, it becomes the first time he's forced to see the truth of how he showed up. Her departure becomes a mirror, and in that mirror he sees not just the loss of her, but the reflection of himself, his patterns, his emotional limitations, his indifference, his lack of effort. That reflection isn't easy to face. A woman rarely leaves the first time she feels hurt. She leaves after she has tried too hard, for too long, with too little in return. She leaves after explaining what she needs, after forgiving things she shouldn't have forgave, after convincing herself to be patient in hopes that things will improve. She leaves after noticing the gap between the love she offered and the love she received. And when she finally lets go, it forces him to confront something he avoided for months, maybe even years, the reality that he took her emotional investment for granted. That realization doesn't hit him in a single moment. It builds. It begins with the small things he remembers, the times she reached out, the times she softened an argument, the times she reassured him when she was the one hurting. It continues when he remembers the moments he dismissed her emotions as too much, or accused her of wanting more than he could give, and slowly the truth sinks in. She wasn't asking for more. She was asking for enough attention, enough effort, enough vulnerability, enough partnership, enough respect. When she leaves, he can no longer distract himself with her presence soothing the tension. There's no longer someone around to absorb his emotional shortcomings. The imbalance that she once carried on her shoulders now sits squarely on his. And that weight forces him to examine the emotional laziness he once excused as normal. He starts to realize the patterns he ignored, how he shut down when she opened up, how he withdrew when she reached out, how he protected his ego instead of protecting the relationship. Psychologically, this confrontation is uncomfortable. It strips away the illusions he used to justify his behavior. It exposes the parts of himself he hoped no one would ever call out, and the hardest part, she never needed to call them out. By walking away, she already did. Her absence becomes accountability. He begins to understand that she didn't leave because she lacked love. She left because she lacked reciprocity. And that distinction changes everything. It forces him to see her not as someone who gave up, but as someone who finally chose not to abandon herself. That level of self-respect illuminates how little he respected the relationship in comparison. And in that realization lies his deepest regret, not losing her, but losing the chance to show up as the man she believed he could be. The truth is simple. When a woman leaves because of a man's behavior, she doesn't just walk away from him. She walks toward the version of herself he never rose high enough to meet. There is a specific moment that shifts everything for a man, and it almost always arrives asterisk after asterisk she's already gone. It's the moment he realizes she's not waiting anymore, she's healing. She's not checking her phone for his messages, she's rebuilding her peace. She's not replaying old conversations, she's creating new possibilities. This shift is subtle, but its impact is powerful. Because when a woman starts moving on, it forces him to confront something he never truly believed would happen. She is learning how to live without him. And that realization hits harder than anything else. A man can ignore her words, he can dismiss her frustration, he can overlook her disappointment, but what he cannot ignore is the unmistakable evidence that she's reclaiming her life. When she stops orbiting around the relationship, when she starts giving her time and energy back to herself, he feels the absence of her emotionally before he feels it physically. That sense of her slipping away becomes the moment he wakes up to the truth. He wasn't just losing her affection. He was losing the version of himself that only existed when she was in his life. Men often assume they have more time. They think she'll stay because she always has. They think her loyalty is unconditional, her patience limitless, her love unshakable. But when she moves on, truly moves on, he realizes how wrong he was. Her growth becomes the proof that she gave up waiting for him to become the partner she needed, and that is the regret that stings most, not just that she's gone, but that she became stronger asterisk because asterisk she left. What complicates the emotional impact is that her transformation isn't dramatic, it's quiet. It happens in her habits, her routines, her glow returning, her interests resurfacing. She starts to become a fuller version of herself, the version she couldn't fully be when she was investing in someone who wasn't investing back. And when he sees that, whether directly or indirectly, he's forced to understand that she didn't move on to spite him. She moved on because she finally remembered who she was without him. Psychologically, this shift disrupts his narrative. He can no longer tell himself she was asking too much or being dramatic. He sees her thriving without him, and suddenly her needs make perfect sense. The stability she wanted was reasonable. The communication she hoped for was normal. The effort she desired was minimal, and the love she offered was far more valuable than he realized at the time. Her growth becomes the evidence that none of the things he minimized were actually excessive. They were simply misaligned with the version of him that didn't want to grow. And here's the part that hits deepest. Once she's moved on, he loses access, not just to her, but to the opportunity to become the man she believed he could be. Her evolution closes a door he thought would always remain open. And he realizes too late that she didn't need him to change for her. She needed him to change for himself, but he waited too long to try. In the end, the regret isn't just that she moved on. It's that she became the woman he always admired. But by the time he finally saw it clearly, she no longer needed him to see it at all. And that's the truth many realize too late. Losing her hurts. But watching her rise without you is what transforms regret into something permanent.